In today's video, I will discuss the 6 most valuable things I have learned from the book Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini. I've found these principles helpful not just financially, but also in my personal life and career as well. Welcome to I Will Become a Millionaire. People, like animals, are wired for mental shortcuts in reasoning. These automatic, fixed action patterns are used against us by marketers for their gain. By learning about these marketing tricks, we can inoculate ourselves against them and use them to gain greater influence. These tools can help others achieve outcomes that are genuinely in their own best interest, or be used to take advantage of people. The 6 identified principles behind these tools are reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity. This rule states that we should try to repay in kind what another person has provided us. This desire for reciprocity can be used to produce a yes response to a request that, if not for an existing feeling of indebtedness, would have likely been refused. In fact, people hate the feeling of being indebted to someone so much that a small gift or favour will often lead to a larger reciprocal response. Take the example of Hare Krishnas offering the gift of a flower that they refuse to take back when asking for donations. As the flower's new owner, they cannot unburden themselves from the subconscious debt, so the social pressure to donate leads to a higher donation rate than soliciting alone. Then, when the crowds die down, the Krishnas check nearby bins for the discarded flowers so that they can give them away once again. This principle can also be seen in action with free samples in supermarkets, which encourages you to buy something you otherwise wouldn't, or mints that come along with the bill in restaurants so that you tip more. On the flip side, you could use this in your own life. At work, for example, you could help your colleagues, publicly praise them, and generally act in such a way that you build up a bank of social obligations owed to you. These obligations will be settled at some point, probably to your advantage. If you want to get, you have to first give. Commitment and consistency. Once we have made the choice to take a stand, we will be driven by personal and interpersonal pressures to a nearly obsessive degree to be, and to appear, consistent with that commitment. This means if I can convince you to act in a minor way in relation to something, then you'll be more likely to act in that way in the future. From there I can get you to do another small thing that's similar, then a bigger thing, and then, before you know it, you've eaten the whole salami. This could be something as simple as getting someone to lend you a pen, as they are now the type of person who does favours for you. A stunning example of this principle in action is in the prison camp program during the Korean War. Many captured American soldiers were put in POW camps run by Chinese communists. The American soldiers were trained to give minimal details, like name, rank, and number, for example. However, the Chinese communists committed a sophisticated psychological assault on them, using this principle to gain their compliance. They were first asked to make statements so mildly anti-American or pro-communist as to seem inconsequential, like the United States is not perfect. They were then gradually pushed to make bigger and bigger declarations and to expand on them. They didn't want to appear inconsistent, so they complied. They would then get these prisoners to read their statements in discussion groups, then maybe record them as anti-American propaganda. As they found themselves a collaborator without coercion, to remain consistent, the men would begin giving away military secrets, informing on fellow prisoners, and even publicly denouncing America. The majority of prisoners collaborated at some time. Don't underestimate the power of commitment. Social proof. This rule applies especially to the way we decide what constitutes correct behaviour. We view a behaviour as more correct in a given situation to the degree that we see others performing it. This is because we think that if a large number of people are doing the same thing, they must know something that we don't, so we imitate them. This can be exploited by generating a false consensus by informing us something is the fastest growing, best selling thing that everyone loves, because people don't have to convince us directly that something is good. We are much more persuaded by people's actions than any other form of proof. We are most vulnerable to the influence from social proof when we are highly uncertain. A shocking example of this can be seen in the 1964 murder of Genovese. Over a 35-minute period, Catherine was stabbed to death, and despite being witnessed by at least 38 neighbours, no one tried to help or call the police until she was already dead. You might think, these people are cold and uncaring. But people didn't help Catherine precisely because there were so many observers. They believed either that because no one else is acting, then perhaps it's not an emergency, or because it's being witnessed by so many people, then someone must have called the police. This is called pluralistic ignorance. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. If you're ever in a similar situation, then signal to an individual to help rather than a group, because absent of the influence of social proof, you will likely be helped. Liking. It might seem obvious, but people are much more likely to be influenced and persuaded by those that they like than those that they don't. If you want to become more influential, you simply need to become more liked by those around you. Cialdini highlights many factors that cause a person to like another person, but I will highlight 3 here. Physical attractiveness. It is well known that good-looking people have an advantage in social interactions. However, we may have underestimated the size of that advantage. Research has shown we automatically assign favourable traits to attractive people, like talent, kindness, honesty, and intelligence. We also make these judgments without being aware that physical attractiveness is what is influencing us. Experiments have also demonstrated that attractive people are more likely to get help when in need, and are more persuasive in changing an audience's opinion, irrespective of the sex of the participants. Similarity. We like people who are similar to us, with the same views, interests, personality, values, etc. So if you want to increase rapport and connection to gain compliance, you could appear like the chosen person in a wide variety of ways, such as dressing in a similar way, or finding/manufacturing areas of shared interest. Association. The principle of association is a general one, governing both negative and positive connections. An innocent association with either bad things or good things will influence how people feel about us. Why is association so important in being liked? People will often root for their own sex, culture, locality, etc. because you are deeply associated with them. Being linked to positive events raises your social standing, while negative ones diminish it. This is also why models or athletes are often used for product adverts. Their beauty, desirability, or athletic ability will be linked to the product, and then will be linked to you. This may explain why you shot the messenger or sent the weatherman an angry letter when it poured down on your daughter's wedding day. Authority. Once we realise that obedience to authority is mostly rewarding, it is easy to allow ourselves the convenience of automatic obedience. We follow the lead of the people we trust, especially if they are knowledgeable experts or they are powerful. We are also taught to obey authority figures and that disobedience is wrong. The assumption is that by complying with them, you will have a favourable outcome, rather than trying to make a more accurate, but more effortful decision yourself. This means that the greater perceived power or knowledge a person has, the more likely people are to comply with their demands. People will use things like titles, experience, certificates, and uniforms to increase this perceived power and therefore compliance. If you want to use this principle to influence people in the real world, remember that it is less effective to promote your own brilliance and authority than other people doing it for you. Outside of acting in a way that deems recommendation, you could also ask others to recommend you, or recommend them first so that they feel a pressure to recommend you in return. Strangely, it doesn't seem to matter who that person is or if they benefit from promoting you. Authority generates compliance. Scarcity. When our freedom to have something is limited, the item becomes less available and we experience an increased desire for it. However, we rarely recognise that psychological reactance has caused us to want the item more. All we know is that we want it. This is a fairly simple concept. People fear losing things more than they desire gaining them. This means that people are extremely motivated to compete for scarce resources, especially because they use the availability of a product or service as a mental shortcut to decide on its quality. This means that if a company generates scarcity, or a sense of scarcity, using things like limited edition, deadlines, or auctions, people will think less and act more. One area where this can be clearly seen is in online sales platforms such as hotels, which will often say things like, only 2 rooms left at this price. This adds both a sense of scarcity for the product as well as of time. In summary, we feel obligated to pay back gifts and favours. We want to be consistent with our past actions. We copy the actions of other people. We prefer to say yes or buy from people we like. We follow people in positions of authority. And we want things more when they're harder to get. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Please let me know your opinions, questions, and suggestions in the comments below. Have a fantastic day.